it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you my friend, John Kruth.
There we go. I'm really appreciative that Scooter asked me to come here and talk to you guys. It's wonderful to share what's going on at the Rhine with the community. I thought some of you don't know me, haven't heard much about me, so I thought first I'd just tell you a little bit about myself. I am the executive director of the Rhine since 2011. I'm the education director of the Rhine Education Center, which is online courses that we teach from the Rhine. I've been a researcher since 2009. Is that what it says? Yes, 2009. I have degrees from different things. I've been studying and learning about parapsychology from when I was very small. So this is kind of the professional kind of information. But let me tell you about me. All right. So I started whenever I was very young. My family was very friendly to psi experiences. We didn't call it psi experiences, this is just what we did. From the time that I was probably about actually like 5 or 6 years old, my brothers and sisters and I were sitting around and we were doing meditation, we were doing hypnosis, we were doing imagery, and it was very natural for us. It was something we did as our normal life, and it wasn't until I got to be a teenager that I realized not everybody does this. And as soon as I realized not everybody does this, I thought, how am I going to explain these things that are so natural and normal to me to the people that I meet? And I thought, well, maybe if I started talking their language, maybe the language of science might help. And so this is where I started to study parapsychology when I was a teenager. Started to learn about it. I didn't even know it was parapsychology back then. It wasn't until I was about 20 that I heard about the Rhine Research Center. When I heard about the Rhine Research Center, my first thought is, wow, I want to work there. I didn't want to be the boss. I just wanted to work there someday, and here I am now. I'm able to do this. So that's kind of what led me through this long path going in different areas. I worked in technology and did a whole bunch of different jobs, and a lot of people say, well, how did you go from technology to parapsychology? To me, that's not what I did. I kind of took a sidetrack into technology from where I was going the whole time, which was towards parapsychology. So I'll just give you a little background about who I am and why you might want to listen to me today. So Scooter contacted me last fall and said, hey, we'd really like you to come here and talk about the research that's going on at the Rhine. And I thought, well, 9 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, people aren't going to want to hear about statistics and about methodology and stuff. Yeah, I know, Mike, you're a little different. But not everybody wants to hear about statistics and data this early in the morning. So I thought, well, how about if I talk a little bit about the places around the Rhine and talk about the Rhine and the places that we find sacred, things that we find are really powerful places. So these are some of the places that I'm going to talk about today. First, I'm going to talk about Durham and Duke University. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Duke Parapsychology Lab and how that led to the Rhine Research Center. I want to talk then about going inside the Rhine and some of the places inside the Rhine that are special, and also some of the research we've done that actually leads to the power of place. How do places become powerful? And finally, I'm going to mention the SCI Corridor, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, Durham. What does this stuff have to do with Durham? I'm sure you're looking at it and say, well, that's Sherlock Holmes, okay? He wasn't from Durham. But back in the 1920s, there was this man, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He wrote the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. He went to the university, he was going through the States, and he was at the University of Chicago giving a talk, but he wasn't talking about Sherlock Holmes. He was talking about research that he was doing with the Society for Psychical Research over in the UK. He was doing research on mediums to learn about, hey, are these mediums, these people who do these wonderful performances, with shrouds and, coins and faces falling out of the air and, trumpets playing, were they real? Is there anything real about it? Well, in the audience, as he gave this talk, was this young man named J.B. Rhine. He was a student at the University of Chicago, and he was so fascinated that he went home and talked to his wife, Louisa, and said, you know, she was also a PhD botanist at the University of Chicago, and said, I think we could study this in an academic environment. So they started to contact different people around the country, and finally they came in contact with this man named William McDougall, who's up at Harvard, who said, hey, I'm going down to this brand new university in Durham, North Carolina. And Louisa said, where's that? And he said, but they took a trip, and they decided, we're going to go down there, and we're going to work with McDougall and see if we can study mediumship. Well, as they were traveling from Chicago down to Durham, North Carolina, they were driving down the back roads, and they came through Virginia, and they went through Richmond. And as they were driving through Richmond, they saw a sign, and it said, come see the psychic horse. This is Lady Wonder, the psychic horse. And of course, they thought this is a sign. You know, they're traveling to go and study mediumship, and there's a sign about a psychic horse, so they took a sidetrack. Went in and met the woman who was in charge of it, and made arrangements to come up and do research with them. They went up, and that was one of the first publications they did related to parapsychology, or related to the subject of psychical research, as they called it at that time, was related to Lady Wonder, who they discovered did seem to be psychic, which is amazing. And you can read a little bit more about this, and there was actually a Mysteries at the Museum episode on this as well. But they continued on down to this town in North Carolina, which was little more than a crossroads with the train stop. And the story goes that Louisa, this is JB's wife, Louisa, when she pulled into town with JB, she looked around and she said, oh my God, you brought me to a place that doesn't even have a bookstore. But Durham has changed since then. Now Duke University has grown, and they've really turned into, a lot of what's happened there was built around the Duke Parapsychology Lab. Now you might think the Duke Parapsychology Lab really didn't build Durham. You know, tobacco built Durham. Yes, you're right. Tobacco was really what brought a lot of people in. There was a lot of activity around it, and the tobacco money actually is what started Duke University. But the Duke Parapsychology Lab was founded in 1935 by J.B. Rhine, and it was one of the first places that people were actually trying to study academic parapsychology. In fact, J.B. Rhine defined the field of parapsychology. He outlined it. There was a lot of things that were called psychical research before. There were a lot of different topics coming up related to it. Most of it around survival and spirits and mediums who were contacting spirits. J.B. Rhine broke it down even further. Being a botanist, his wife being a botanist, they broke down the categories and created a taxonomy behind it. This is J.B. with some of the early researchers, Gaither Pratt and Charlie, can't remember his name. Anyway, this is some of the early research that they were doing at the Rhine back in the 1930s. J.B. actually published his first monograph called Extrasensory Perception in 1935, and this is where the term ESP started to become very popular. He didn't coin the term, but it really became popular. He started going radio shows and started getting many people involved in the topic, and people got excited. Experiencers from around the world started to know more and more about this lab in this little sleepy town of Durham, North Carolina, that was doing this amazing research. People came from all over to visit this amazing lab. Through the 1960s, this is Eileen Garrett, who is a very famous medium and psychic, who came to the labs. You might recognize Burl Ives, Eddie Albert. They came down together at one point in the 50s, and they sang for the people at the Rhine. But there were stars coming from all over the world. And over here, you see Timothy Leary, who actually came to the Rhine in the early 1960s with some material to try to see if it would help to facilitate ESP. And shared it with the people at the lab, And some people that you know, I'm not going to mention any specific names, but some people that you know were part of this experience. I'm not going to call it an experiment because they never really got to the experiment part. You know, people always ask us, you know, do you do research with kids, or do you do research to see if, you know, different drugs affect things? And we always say, well, you know, we'd like to do that type of research, but it's hard to get them to really pay attention and follow the directions very well. But you can see, it really started to become a drawing point. At one point, when the university first started, once the lab got popular, the lab was bringing in more money for the university than any other department, including the medical center. They actually kicked off the funding for Duke University through the Parapsychology Labs. It was an amazing, amazing drawing point. Start to draw people. It becomes a magical place that people want to come to. They hear about these different amazing people coming to the location, and all of a sudden this starts to become a mystical location. So this started in 1935, and J.B. Rhine continued at the labs at Duke University until the 1960s, when he reached mandatory retirement age. And after he reached mandatory retirement age, it was around 1964, 65, he knew he was going to have to leave the university. And he started thinking, well, do I stay with the university, or do I leave the lab with the university where it's probably not going to get the attention it needs? Or do I take my research with me? And he decided to move off campus, and he founded the Foundation for Research on the Nature of Man, Institute for Parapsychology. It's a nonprofit organization that he founded off campus. It was right near the campus. And again, people continued to come from out of town. People started hearing about it from everywhere. You can see this is one of the early research meetings over here. This is the Fernum, they called it. What a horrible name. F-R-N-M, Fernum. But they did start, you can see this is what they called the summer study program. The summer study program, there was very few places that people could learn about parapsychology in the world. There weren't really academic programs. And since he left Duke University, there were almost no classes that were available, or no programs, and very few individual classes that were available to allow you to study parapsychology. This is back in 1965. It was really starting to boom. People were starting to look at this research in very careful ways and saying, look, there's something to this. Well, people used to come in the summer and spend 2 months at the lab learning from different professional parapsychologists. They would come from all over. And you can see, I don't know many of the people in this picture, but there are some very, very famous parapsychologists who've come through the labs, who spent time there. This is from the 1970s. The programs continued for 20 years, where they had these summer study programs. Again, bringing people, teaching them something that they just have this drive to know more about. They have this real desire to understand how science looks at these phenomena, how they can explore these phenomena that they've been experiencing their whole lives. This is, again, it turns into this magical place for people. So the Foundation for Research on the Nature of Man was the first move away from Duke University. And today, we're continuing to do similar research. We still have many people, yeah, you can recognize some of these people here, don't you? Yeah. We still have people who are coming, and our goals are still the same. We're still trying to explore these exceptional experiences, anomalous phenomena, different paranormal events, and we try to do it in the context of science, using the language of science, trying to help people to understand using statistics. This is a language that some people speak very well, and we want to try to give those people something to hang on to, speak to them in their own language, and show them different events that are occurring. So besides the fact that we do the science, we also have a community. And you can see some of the wonderful events. We have, this is Sally Rhine Feather and Susan Freeman. Sally is J.B. Rhine's daughter, who she still comes around the Rhine. She's 88 years old this year. She doesn't mind people knowing, because once you reach 88, you're proud to be 88, I guess. But she's very happy to come by the Rhine. She's always around. She's very involved in our activities there. We have people coming from all over the community. We had a man come about a year or so ago. He started contacting me by phone. He's from India. He and his wife were traveling to America to see their son, who had just finished medical school and was down in Florida. Their son, Rhine, was his name. They named him Rhine. Well, after JB was at the Rhine, as he approached 80 years old, he knew he had to find another executive director. He knew that he had to find someone else to follow up. He ended up working with a man named Ramakrishna Rao. And Rao he was an Indian researcher. He came to the Rhine in the 60s, worked with the Rhine for quite a while. He became a top parapsychologist in the field, was setting up institutions in India, and then came and was the director of the Rhine for about 18 years. It's a pretty long time. His second son was named Rao. He actually named his children Rhine and Rao after the directors of the Rhine Research Center, and this was his chance to come to Durham to see the Rhine Research Center. It was like a pilgrimage for him to travel this long distance. I know you get this here too. People make pilgrimage to the Monroe Institute. It's an amazing location. They do the same thing for the Rhine. It's magical for them to come into the library, to see different things we have there. It's a wonderful experience. So I told you about my own experience and how I kind of started from this basis. As soon as I heard about the Rhine, I was like, I want to work there. And I spent my life moving towards it. We have people coming from all different parts of the world who have similar sorts of experiences. Again, the magicalness of the location that all started from this horse back in the 1920s, right? So let me take the next step and bring you inside the Rhine a little bit and talk about some of the different locations within the Rhine. And the first thing I want to talk about is the library at the Rhine. Our library, we have over 3,000 volumes that are on parapsychology. We have a number of different journals going back to the 1870s on psychical research. The Journal of Parapsychology, which is published at the Rhine, started in 1937 and continues to be published today. Peer-reviewed academic scientific research on these different phenomena that we experience. But besides this great resource that we have available, including archives of the Rhine, we also have a number of different meetings that occur in this room. We have open research meetings, which a number of people in here, Jim, Mike, and some other people have come and been part of, where every Wednesday afternoon we just sit around and we talk about research. Well, sometimes it gets a little off topic and we talk about some other things too, but we usually talk about different research projects we're either working on, things we've read about, or different ideas we have for how we might progress research in the future. It's open to the community. So we have researchers sit around and have this discussion, but we also have people come in from the community and bring in their own ideas. We actually get into ancient aliens and TV shows sometimes too, which is kind of off topic, but it all helps us to build more community and lets the researchers interact with experiencers. We have this great meeting called the Psychic Experiences Group. It happens once a month, and they've been doing this for a number of years. It happens in this library. It's not a support group. It's not a counseling session, but it's a place where people can get together and talk about their experiences. Just explore their experiences, listen to other people tell their experiences. I mention this specifically because many times I've gone to these meetings and there will be someone who it's their first time at the meeting. And so they'll sit off to the side and kind of be quiet and just be, usually their eyes are down, they're not really paying attention. And the meeting will start going on and they'll start hearing different stories from people about their experiences. Somebody talking about a dream, somebody talking about having some premonition of their relative far away and giving them a call and finding out they really needed to talk. Any of these experiences, some people talking about out-of-body experiences, healing activities, and you'll see this person, first time, their head will start to lift and they'll start looking around. Their eyes will start to get big. And usually, after you get partway through the meeting, all of a sudden, you see this emotional outpouring from them. They become amazed that there are other people who are having these same experiences that they are. It really brings them in and makes them feel like I can't talk to anyone about this. I can't talk to my family. I can't talk to my friends. When I do, they all think I'm crazy. But here, it's a place where I can speak about these things and feel safe. This emotional outburst, this tremendous emotional feeling that comes around this community that is able to speak about these things contribute to this location becoming very important. People feel safe there. They feel like when they come, they can really feel like they can grow in this location. They feel comfortable and safe. We have a dream study group which has a similar type of environment. It's not so much about this big reveal, but it is a place where people can talk about their dreams and explore what they mean and talk about different ways people dream. Talk about lucid dreams, talk about shared dreaming, a number of different topics like this. All of this happens in our library at the Rhine. And, oh, I didn't mention, well, why are there bent spoons up there, right? Well, we also have this one event that we do at the Rhine. We do it about 3 or 4 times a year, and it is really one of the funnest things we do there. It's called Psy Games. And what we do is we all get together in the library, and we usually have people sign up. We usually have about 30 people. It's usually sold out pretty quickly. And we show people how we used to test ESP and explain to them what parapsychology is and what we test. Things like the Zener cards, the ESP cards that we saw in one of the early pictures where people would look at the cross, the wavy lines and circles and triangles and things. They do some ESP tests. It's participatory. They get to do the ESP tests and keep track of it as they go. We show them how to do remote viewing. We teach them a little bit about what remote viewing is. We also let them do some PK tests where they're trying to affect machinery and trying to see if they can roll dice and make dice do certain things. And we do this, and we break into groups and run them from one area to another, and everybody enjoys it, and then we all get back together and we bend spoons. And I didn't say we try to bend spoons, because every time spoons are bending all over that room. It's really exciting. I mean, it's so much that once the spoons start bending, people leave, and they leave bent spoons behind. Can you imagine going to a spoon bending party, bending a spoon and saying, oh, well, I don't need this, I'll just leave it behind. They have so many bent spoons that they just, so we have a big jar full of like hundreds and hundreds. I think, well, we counted them. We had a guess how many bent spoons are in the jar thing last year. And I think it was over 500 bent spoons that we had that people just left behind. Yeah, it's really big, yes. We're trying to figure out what to do with it. We're gonna make wind chimes or, I don't know. We would probably make lawn chairs out of them, we have so many, but what's that? Lapel pins. You're going to wear bent? They're pretty big. Okay. Well, hey. Okay, we got a customer. Great. I got to get your name afterwards. Anyway, so this is the library, and so the library, you can see that there's activities. They take on a magical quality for people, and so the library becomes a place that people really feel safe, especially for these certain events. Now I'm going to bring you to the next step, and this is the research labs. And I'm going to start out with the Ganzfeld. Some of you might be familiar with the Ganzfeld and what it is. If not, I'll just go through it really quickly. The Ganzfeld is a technique that was developed based on the dream research that was done in New York on the Maimonides labs back in the 1960s. They were trying to determine, are people more psychic when they're sleeping and dreaming than when they're awake? And they found out, yes, they were. They did experiments, and what they do is they wait and they watch people's eyes, and when they went into REM sleep, they knew they were dreaming, so they'd wake them up and say, what were you dreaming about? And they had someone trying to send information to them while it was happening, and they found out, yes, they were more psychic when they were dreaming. They seemed to be able to get this information. Well, it's interesting, but it's not very convenient. First of all, you got someone sleeping, and you got to wake them up every time they start dreaming, which, it's not very comfortable for them to sleep that way. Not only this, but the researchers have to stay up all night watching this experiment go on. And then, and if you don't get any results, you got to wait a whole nother day before you can do this again. Well, in order to try to take advantage of some of the things they learned in this experiments, and some other research that was being done on altered states, there's a man named Charles Honorton who created this idea of the Ganzfeld experiment. We have different rooms. They're shielded metal rooms at the Rhine, so no electrical signals can get in and out of them. That's to kind of convince the skeptics that we're not using radio signals or something like this. At the same time, we have somebody who sits in this room in a very, very comfortable chair. They wear headphones, and they also have half ping pong balls taped over their eyes. You can see over here, and a red light shown on it. This is to create a sense of sensory deprivation, to kind of quiet the activity around them. It's not only a room that is protected with metal from radio signals, but it's not only quiet acoustically, but it's electrically quiet as well. People walk into this room, and there's been experiments been done on here. This is actually the experiment since the 1980s that is considered the strongest evidence for repeatable psi activity. It's been consistently repeated in labs in different parts of the world using this same protocol. I put this picture here because that's Charles Honorton here on the left. And this is, you know, back when they were trying to figure out how this worked, they looked at what they did at Maimonides and they said, we want to put people in an altered state. How are we going to do this? So in the 1970s, they were trying all kinds of different things on how to do this. Well, that guy on the wall over there was having people listening to sounds and trying to say, hey, maybe this will help get them into a different state of mind and give them the opportunity to express psi more easily. These guys were strapping people onto a metal frame with belts, blindfolding them, putting headphones on them, lifting them in the air and spinning them around like crazy and saying, maybe this will work. Well, it definitely put them in an altered state, but not the kind that was really conducive to psi activity. But they progressed, and they eventually got to this protocol that I talked about. And I didn't go into it in detail. You can learn more about it if you want. There's more information on the website. But I didn't go into a lot of detail about it. But they did come up with something that was less intrusive, didn't make people as dizzy, and I gave them a chance to, and it did produce the psi effect that they were looking for. Now this protocol progressed and became more automated through the 1990s, but since the 1990s, really nothing's been done. The protocol hasn't changed. In fact, a lot of parapsychologists who are working in the field think that we need to stick as close to this original protocol as possible because it works. But a lot of things have happened since the 1990s. Currently, we have a new group at the Rhine. I heard Frank talking yesterday about the groups at Monroe and how, you know, the median age is kind of high. It's in the 40s. Well, our median age at the Rhine is a little bit older than that, let me say. Most of the people, I'm one of the younger people at the Rhine. I really am. So my goal since I got there is I don't want to be the youngest guy in the room. I want younger people in there because I need people to do technology, and I can't do it all myself. We have a group of new young researchers who are now coming, who are producing a new research study to update the Ganzfeld. So what they're doing is they're taking the original protocol, taking what's worked best, and still, you know, I told you what they were doing here. It's still pretty intrusive what they're doing now, where you put people in a room, you put ping pong balls on their eyes. Come on. Who wants ping? And you know, you're putting these headphones, these bulky headphones on them. Yeah, you could use earbuds, but but it usually takes, these sessions take about 40 minutes. What we actually want to do is break it down, and we were thinking, well, maybe part of that 40 minutes, the reason it takes so long, is because first thing you got to do is get over the fact that you got ping pong balls taped to your eyes and things on your head. So they're trying to update this and make people more relaxed and more comfortable from the very beginning. This is where we're progressing into a new era of parapsychology and trying to bring people to update the old protocols and get more young people involved in the science of parapsychology. So the Ganzfeld has also, because of all the experiments that have been done in there, it's kind of become a very special room. But I don't know how many people who are sensitive that I've brought to the Rhine, and I show them that room and they go in and they sit in a chair and they're like, I'm not leaving. It just feels nice in here. Because of the fact that it's electronically quiet, your phones don't work in there, it really gives people a sense of comfort and calm. Another reason, besides the community, that sacred space develops. Another one of the labs at the Rhine is what we call the Bioenergy Lab. You know, we talk about healers all the time, talk about energies. People who do martial arts, they talk about chi, they talk about energies. People who do a lot of meditation, they talk about kundalini energies. But what is this energy? Well, we decided to try to see if we could look into whether it might be light. I'm lucky enough to have an electrical engineer who's over at Duke University who had some equipment that he had set aside. This is what we call a photomultiplier tube. It actually is extremely sensitive. It will measure a single photon of light every half second. It's very, very sensitive. This is keyed towards ultraviolet light in the spectrum. So it's not visible light. It's keyed towards ultraviolet light. So what we do is we bring people in the room and have them sit in the room. And if I have the room empty, it's a really dark room. It's all painted black. It's a double dark room. It's all shielded from outside light. Once I set it up and I get the machine cooled down and I have it running, I usually read about 3 to 5 photons a second. It's dark. 3 to 5 photons is like nothing. It's not going to trigger anything. You're not going to see anything. If I bring a person in, anybody, doesn't matter who it is, and just have them sit in front of the machine, that number jumps from 3 to 5 up to about 12 to 20 photons a second. We glow. All of us. Everybody, we have a natural glow in the ultraviolet range. This is something back in the 1970s, it was considered crazy to even think about this. But there was a man named Fritz Popp who started to explore the idea of light coming from organic matter. And he was looking at plants and fruits and vegetables that were grown organically versus ones that were grown and that weren't organic. And he saw a big difference. And people were like, wow, that's great. Who cares? It's light coming from plants. Who cares? Well, it's not only plants, but it's all organic matter. People, any animals, plants, even getting into single cells. We've taken blood cells, and you can see light coming from blood cells as well. All organic matter. But this is not parapsychology. From the 1970s until now, when it was crazy, now it's studied in the upper level biology courses. They say biophotons exist. We know it exists. We know it happens. We don't understand why. We don't know where it comes from. We have lots of explanations, but we don't know exactly where it's coming from. But now they're looking at it at MIT, they're looking at it at UCLA, they're looking at Japan and Germany, Italy, all over the world, but only in upper level biology. What we're doing it different is we have people go in there and we take a baseline, and then we say, okay, you think you're a healer. I don't know. You say you're a healer. Start your healing activity. Let's see if there's a change in the light. Start your martial arts form. Let's see if we see any change. Are we measuring any differences? Well, most of the people who go in there, probably almost 90% of the people who go in there, I get no change. The baseline just continues through the whole process. In fact, some people who are really, really good healers who have had long careers, I get no change. Doesn't mean they're not healing, it means I'm not measuring what they're doing. But 10% of the people, I do see a change. And when I'm talking about change, I'm talking about, like I said, 12 to 20 photons a second. I'll see jumps up to 80 photons. This is huge. It's 4 times the baseline. Statistically, this is off the charts. But some people, I'll see the jumps up to 200, 3,000, hundreds of thousands. And I've had 2 people who went over 1 million photons a second. How many statistics do you need to prove that something's happening, right? This is huge, huge results that we're seeing in this lab. So what are we measuring? These are some people who I've had in the lab. This is Ed Edwards here in the center over here. Ed is consistently, when he's come over to the lab, he's been coming for probably about 7 years or so. And when I first started working with him in the lab, it was kind of hit and miss what was going on, but I was getting huge effects. But over time, he's learned, which tells me you can develop this process over time. You can start to control it and do different things with it. We are getting huge results. I'm actually finishing up a paper right now on the results that we've got with Ed over the last 5 years. This is also someone as Shirley. She has done psychokinesis and PK activity. And we brought her into the lab. And this is Graham Watkins, who was working with her. She also showed huge results in the lab. So we are measuring these energies. You can't know what it's like for someone who's a healer to come into the lab, for us to measure this light effect and say, you're producing energy, I can see it in my data, it's statistically significant. People, it's the first time in their life that they're hearing from someone, hey, it's real. And not only do you know it's real and what you feel is real, but we can measure it using scientific equipment. People have tremendous responses to this. And they want to come back again. Let me do it again, let me do it again, let me do it again. So this is also the mystery around this, and the way that we've actually formulated a way to measure this has provided people some validation for what they've been experiencing their whole lives. Healing research. This is Bill Bengston. Some of you know who Bill is. Some of you might have met Bill before. Some of you might not know who Bill is. Bill developed a technique that he had learned from early on how to elicit healing activity to occur. He would never say that he's doing healing, but something about this technique provides an environment that healing is allowed to occur in it. And he's done some amazing research. I'm not going to go into details about it, but I'll tell you that he's doing research with mice, and the results that he's getting from it are that the mice are being cured of cancer, and that they cannot be reinfected with cancer after they've gone through the treatment. There's a lot of details in it, so I'm not going to go into it, but what he has done is develop this technique, and he's developed a couple books and listening tapes, and this group is the Rhine Healing Energies team. We're all toasting with a little wine there in this one, because part of the technique is to picture yourselves having a success and all celebrating together. This was one of our images that we had that we used as part of our training technique. And so once we reached a success point, we said, well, let's do it. So we started drinking, having some wine and some drinks, and well, I won't go into this anyway. It was a really fun day, which had an effect on electronics around the room, around the lab while we were there, which we didn't anticipate that was going to happen. But the team has been together, and we've been working together for 5 years every week. To get 8 people who come together for every week for 5 years, that's an amazing thing in and of itself. This is a healing team that's been working together for 5 years consistently. And we're doing research trying to understand more about what the experience is, also to understand more about what might be happening, how this is working actually, and seeing if we can replicate some of Bill's original experiments, although I'm not going to be working with mice anytime soon. Now you might wonder, why is this here? Well, that's the room that we do our healing in, or that we do our meetings. I'm not going to say we do our healings, because I don't know if we're doing healings or not. People feel better afterwards, oftentimes. But this is the room we do it, and this table is the table that we set up as we put some pads on there and some sheets, and we let people stretch out on there, and this is where we do our healing activity. People come into this room now and they feel really good. And there seems to be something about the room that has taken on the character of the activities that go on in the room. And that table, people really like to touch the table and be near the table. How could what we're doing in there have an effect on the table? How could this all come together? I'll get back to that in a second. Another area of research that we're doing at the Rhine is psychokinesis research. And psychokinesis, mind-matter interaction, having an effect on the world with your intention. And we use different types of tools. This is what we call an Egley wheel. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Psi wheels on the internet or anything. It's just a piece of aluminum foil. It's a pinwheel that you make out of aluminum foil. And you put it inside of a jar, and people try to move it. And you'll see people all over the internet saying, oh, look, I have psychokinesis. And they're like, and you'll see that the pinwheel starts spinning and stuff. A lot of them are faked. A lot of them are. But we've actually seen it happen quite often. Where it was one of the most amazing things to me, where someone came to the lab, sat down in a room of 11 or 12 different researchers, sat at the end of the table, had one of these Psi wheels inside of a jar, and made it spin. And all the researchers their jaw dropped, because it was happening right in front of us. There were no specific controls, but everybody started looking. Is there magnets involved? Stop it, make it move the other way, and she did. She was able to control this. From there, we started taking this a step further and looking at it in more detail. What we realized, though, is these side wheels are handmade. They're very inconsistent. And so this Egley wheel that is over here, it's a similar type of thing. It's a little pinwheel. And it has a little battery in it, so when it spins, it beeps, and little lights light up, so you can see when it's actually working. We also have, this is what we call a Celeron random event generator. It came from the Princeton labs, where they were studying, the Pear Lab at Princeton, where they were studying psychokinesis for about 20 years, trying to see if people had an effect on machine. If you wanted to get, it generates ones and zeros. It's like an automatic coin flipper, right? If you want to get more ones, they tried to see, does it get more ones? You want to get more zeros, you get more zeros. We also have other equipment. This is just a chart recorder to set up to measure static electricity to see if people can affect it from a distance. All these things trying to test psychokinesis, seeing if people can purposely affect instruments. But we also have what Scooter was talking about, unconscious effects on electronic devices. One of the things, I worked in technology for 17 years before I ever went to the Rhine, and it's really clear when you're in a development environment, there are some people when they walk in the room, things just seem to break, and they're the testers. And then you have other people when they come in the room, everything seems to work, and they're the developers. And when you get the testers breaking things, and then you got the developers coming in at work, boy, it makes them mad. It makes the testers really mad when things start working when they didn't work a minute ago. And it makes the developers really mad when testers walk in and things break all of a sudden. So this is very well known, but it's all anecdotal. Is it real? We all talk about how, you get upset, you might be working on, and you're just like, this thing won't work for me. Why won't it work? And you're trying to figure out well, my question was, could there be something about your mood and your attitude and the environment that is having the effect on this? Maybe it's not that you're getting so frustrated you're pushing the wrong buttons. Maybe you're actually breaking the computer. I don't know. So we set up a lab where we actually did a controlled test. We did a test to see if people, when they were aggravated, when they were frustrated, if more errors would occur in a computer system. And the results came out positive. It came out, well, I don't know if it's positive or negative. I don't, like medical things, I don't know. But it came out that yes, when you get more emotion, when people get more frustrated, when they get more aggravated, that we're seeing more errors in the computer system than whenever they're not frustrated, whenever it's really easy to do. What's important about this is that these are unconscious effects. These tests over here, they're all about us trying to affect the machine. Over here, they're unconscious. And Scooter mentioned that we did some poltergeist investigations, and this was an investigation I did a few years ago where there was a little boy, and he couldn't have a cell phone because it broke whenever he had it. His computers wouldn't work around him. When he went to school and they were taking automated tests on the computer, the teacher thought he was breaking all the machines, so she'd make him go last because the machines always broke whenever he used them. I mean, this went on and on and on, but it was unconscious effects that were causing these things. So we can affect the world around us in unconscious ways without meaning to. It just seems that these things, just by our activities, by our moods, by our emotions, sometimes it can have an effect on things around us. So this brings me to how could sacred spaces actually develop? There was an experiment that was done back in the 1970s by this man who you saw before, Graham Watkins. And he's actually not quite so good looking whenever you see him in person, but no, I'm joking. Anyway, he did an experiment called the mouse ether experiment. What Graham did is, he's a zoologist. He took mice and used ether, and he would put the mice to sleep using ether. And then he had healers trying to wake the mice up and trying to see, hey, if the healers concentrate on this mouse, not on that mouse, will this mouse wake up more quickly? Amazingly, yes. He got very talented healers, and the mice woke up more quickly. He did a number of different trials over a number of different months, using many different mice, and used all kinds of controls to make sure the mice were they weren't mice that were easily woken up or something like this, and weren't more susceptible to the ether thing. But he did find that there was an effect that was here. Very carefully controlled conditions. Not only did the healers wake the mice more quickly, but he also discovered something he called the linger effect. If he was working with a mouse and they were on the left side of the barrier here, and the healers woke that mouse up more quickly, the next set of mice they put on there, that mouse would wake up more quickly on that left side again. As if something about that location had become charged somehow. And there was a lingering effect at that location. And it would be maintained for a couple hours. They tried to ground it out, you know, do different things, and they couldn't find a way to make it go away. But the effect continued. That location continued to have some sort of healing effect there. But what we've discovered more recently, when we've been doing our PK tests with the Egley wheels, Graham is part of those experiments as well, we've discovered that linger effect actually occurs in PK experiments as well. Now, some people think that PK and healing are very much the same thing. They're like the same thing. You're just affecting biological instruments versus affecting machines and things. I tend to think of it a little differently, but in this case, it seems to act exactly the same as what he was seeing in his healing experiments. The PK experiments do the same thing. There seems to be a lingering effect, but the lingering effect is not at this location. It's not on the left side of the screen, but it's actually on the instruments that we're using. So the effect is affecting the instrument, and then after that person goes away, the instrument continues to be affected no matter where it is. And when I talked to Graham about this, and we talked about his original experiment, he said, you know, we used these aluminum pans to put the mice on. Perhaps it wasn't the location, but it was the aluminum pan that was getting charged. So maybe it was the object that was there and not the location. So when I go back, well, come on, and I look at our healing groups, and I think about all the work we've done on this table in this room, it's very possible that there is a lingering effect on this table that is maintaining this feeling, this whatever is being put into it. We can't measure it. We've used different instruments. We haven't found the instruments to measure it yet, but perhaps it is lingering in this room. So the question then comes, could this lingering effect that we've demonstrated in the laboratory, that we've seen in multiple experiments in different ways, could this give power to a place? Could the experiences we have, the emotions we have, the strong feelings we have around a place and around the objects in a place, could this be what is helping to contribute and create more of a lingering effect that gives power to a place? Could it be the mechanism that creates sacred objects or sacred places? So from the Rhine, we all look at things from a scientific perspective. So I can say, oh, look, we got this idea. Yeah, but we haven't figured out exactly how to test it yet. That's the next step along the way. We have some evidence. So can we take this experiments from the healing perspective, from the PK perspectives, and expand it to larger venues and say, hey, this meeting room that's been used for so many amazing things, does it carry a lingering effect? Is it from the emotions and the feelings that people have in this room? Does that linger in here? Is that what gives it a good feeling? And can we measure that? Of course, we have to consider the importance of community and how when people come together, is it actually the space that we're talking about? Is it actually the objects, which we do see does have an effect? Or is it the community that's making something sacred? We had for years at the Rhine, for about 7 or 8 years, we had been using the same venue on Duke campus to do our events and our presentations. And it felt very special when everybody would get together in the room. Well, and everybody had a really good time at these events. It was a nice auditorium. We had a great sound system and things. And it really, really felt good. People really enjoyed that venue. Me, a little less so, because every time we went in, all the audio, video, visual stuff was all changed, and we had to reset it all from the beginning every time. So I had a whole different perspective because I was behind the scenes. But all the people who came in, they really enjoyed the events. About 2 years ago, we had to move to another venue. When we moved to the other venue, everybody was like, well, I don't know if I like this venue. I don't know it. The community moved. The environment moved as well. Everybody is still feeling, they feel very close together. So is it the community that is making the space sacred? They love this place the way they love the other place. Is it because the community that's there? Or is it something that's specific about the place? I think there's a combination of these things that we have to consider. So that's a little bit about, the Rhine and the different research we're doing. I didn't go into a lot of details. I'm happy to answer questions. I talked a little bit about the linger effect, how this might help to create power in places and make places hold energies. And now I want to mention another really, really sacred space, and that is what I'm calling the SCI Corridor. And that is this area of the country, everywhere from DOPS and Monroe out to ARE out in the east, to the Rhine and IANS, which are actually in the same building, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, that are in the same building in Durham, and down to the University of West Georgia in Carrollton, Georgia, where Christine Simmons-Moore is one of the only academic parapsychologists who is teaching parapsychology at an academic institution, and has PhD students in psychology who are focusing on parapsychological work in the States. So rare. Not all of these groups are part of the Alliance for Global Consciousness. We do have some other groups that are part of it, like Holos University, Glide Wing, ICEAM, IONS, and Marilyn Schlitz that are part of the Alliance for Global Consciousness. But this is a way for us to work together. We've talked about, I've heard you guys talking about redoing your website, different ways to set them up. We were going through a similar process at the Rhine. One of the things that we often talk about is how can we make connections between these organizations. Scooter and I have been talking about this, and Scooter came back here and started working here. We've been trying to find ways to make these connections and make them stronger. If there are ways that we can do it through technology, sharing resources, all of these things are going to bring us all closer together. We have people come to the Rhine, and just 2 weeks ago I had someone come to the Rhine, and I was talking about the different associations we have, about ARE, about the Monroe and DOPS and things. And they just, afterwards they came up to me and said, you guys are so lucky that all of this is so close together. Just a couple hours from here you can go to the Rhine. A couple hours you can go to ARE. It's so lucky that we have these things. We forget about it a lot of times because we don't, for us to stick our heads up and be able to get out of where we are, it's not so easy a lot of times. I gotta tell you, I loved the trip up here. I really enjoyed the drive up here yesterday. And boy, I slept like a baby last night. Some of you guys might have had trouble sleeping. I slept like a baby. It's just so calm and so relaxing. It's a great place here. The sacred space is here, and the sacred spaces at all of these locations come together and give us a really nice environment for people to come visit. Thank you.